Brian, let me follow up really to Norman's point to you. You recently engaged in at the administration with your leadership, Brian, engaged in an extraordinary operation to intercept Iranian gasoline and fuel oil. It sounds like you know more. It's been a little bit unclear to me. That was headed to Venezuela. What do you think Iran will do in response to that? We've already seen their interactions that were unlawful at best, perhaps piracy in the Straits on another vessel. Do we expect Iran to retaliate? And do you see Iran, talk to us about Iran's role with Venezuela. I mean, mere fact that they're trying to interfere in Venezuela in sort of our neighborhood, if you will, really shows that their international adventurism is designed to harm interests and cause instability around the world. Talk to us about that Iranian-Venezuelan relationship, if you could.
These are two pariah states that have found each other, and they're both in a very bad place. You remember I mentioned earlier, two of the worst performing economies in the world are Iran and Venezuela. Because of our maximum pressure campaign, Iran needs money, and because of our pressure campaign on Maduro, he needs fuel. And so they found a marriage of convenience here. The relationship between Iran and Venezuela goes back to the days of Hugo Chavez. So obviously, we believe Maduro's illegitimate, and he's been very bad for the Venezuelan people. One could say the same for the Iranian regime. So we saw this plan to try to deliver a lot of fuel to Maduro from Iran. There were 5 Iranian flag tankers that did make their way to Caracas. We immediately sanctioned the 5 ship captains. There were some other boats that were non-Iranian flagged, and they were operated by somebody outside of Iran. And so my team moved very quickly to strip the flags of those vessels. And then we made very clear to the ship owner that there would be very significant downsides if we see a lack of cooperation. And so working with a number of our interagency partners, we were able to take possession of the Iranian fuel. This is a big loss of revenue to the regime. It also is a bad outcome for Maduro. I think for 2 years now, Secretary Pompeo and I have spoken directly to the maritime community about the dangers of doing business with Iran. When you move Iranian oil, you're funding terrorism. So I look at it as oil for terrorism. And so we have really isolated Iran, and they have a very hard time moving oil or fuel these days, because Iran has become a no-go zone in the maritime community. And that's a very good thing. That is part of collapsing Iran's oil exports, which, as I said earlier, is their chief source of revenue. So not only have we done our sanctions, we've enforced them. One of the great things about working for President Trump is he enforces his red lines. And so when we say, that we're going to bring Iran's oil to zero if they don't come to the table, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to enforce this with a lot of strength. This is something which the prior administration had sanctions, but they weren't very well enforced. I think the business community, UANI, has done very good work on this across administrations. They've made very clear to the business community the dangers and the risks of doing business with Iran. I remember Stuart Levy worked on this when he was at Treasury. This was continued by UANI during the prior administration. And now in this administration, we've made enforcement a really big priority. And that's allowed us to really achieve the results we have of taking Iran from 2.5 million barrels down to 70,000.